Hi, Javi. Argentina, brilliant. Sorry, there seems to be quite a bit of latency here. I think we'll just make do for the time being. Let's wait and see if anyone else joins us. Are we getting sound and video? Are we getting any sound here? Are we getting any sound? Yeah. Can you let me know if there's any sound coming through, please? Brilliant. Does that mean you can hear my voice and you can hear my guitar, Javi? Sorry if I'm saying that wrong, by the way. I'm just going to shut this door and then we'll get started. Right, there we go. Okay, so first of all, obviously, hope everyone is doing very well. If you're watching this after the live stream, which it looks like most people will, the date is, what are we on today? The 22nd of March, and we're all in quarantine and shut down, or what we call self-isolation nowadays, apparently. So I hope you're all well. You're all self-isolating with bearable people, tolerable. And I just wanted to start doing these little daily videos because I work in school and I work in churches, and currently schools and churches are shut down, so I've got all the time in the world. So I normally spend all day every day teaching, so I may as well continue doing a little bit of teaching in the meantime and hope I can help some of you out. So is there anything specific anyone would like me to talk about today? I have an idea in mind. As you can see from the title, I want to talk about practicing a little bit. Was there anything else specific anyone would like me to cover? Please let me know. And I'll get to that, obviously, either today if it's relevant or in a future lesson. I'll plan on doing one of these most days. I'm just doing a little bit of noodling at the minute. Trying to get warm. Right, let's get started with my lesson anyway. So I'm going to put the axe down for now, and I'll maybe come back to the axe later if it's relevant. But you see, I've treated myself to a whiteboard here. So I'm going to get to the whiteboard, and hopefully all those settings are still working. Everyone can see me and hear me. Let's talk about practicing. So I want to give you a very brief background on me. This is my conclusion of pretty much all the mistakes where I've gone wrong along the way. So sorry, it's very distracting seeing the latency on this video. What's the best way of doing this so I can still see your chat? There we go, that's a better way of doing it. So anyway, I've been playing music pretty much my entire life. My dad's a musician, a composer and a pianist and violinist, so he's always had us doing music pretty much from day dot, starting on the piano, then a bit of trumpet, bit of singing, unfortunately, and then finally I settled on the guitar. Now the reason I mention all that is because I want you to know that I went through the whole classical system. I will have spent thousands and thousands of pounds on education, some of which was great and some of which was appalling. And here I am, nearly 30 years old, and I want to sort of look back on the 25 years I've been trying to play music for and share with you some of my insights and some of the things that I think if I could have my time again, I would do differently. So one of the most important thing, which isn't going to be appropriate or relevant to anyone watching this video, because you're watching this video, is you've got to want to get better. You've got to want to play. Now, the reason that I mention that is because I didn't want to play. I didn't want to play at all. I think I was probably about 3 or 4 when I started doing the piano, and I wasn't into that, not into that at all. then I said, oh, can I give this up and do something else? And my dad randomly said, what about the cornet, which is basically a mini trumpet? And I thought, yeah, okay, because it was shiny. Didn't like that either. But still played the piano, still played the cornet, went to lessons every week, went to orchestras and bands and all this stuff. And I then went to a choir school for 4 years and sung in a cathedral choir for 4 years, did music theory, barely scraped through. When I was about 9 years old, did my grade 5 theory, was a terrible student, absolutely appalling. Then I discovered the guitar. And from that point onwards, everything that I hadn't wanted to learn previously, I suddenly wanted to learn. So the reason I say that is because for me, I learned more in the first year of playing guitar than I had done in probably the 10 years prior to that I'd been just dilly-dallying about, because I suddenly wanted to. I was suddenly excited about it. So hopefully if you're sat here watching this video, it's because you're excited about your music. So that's brilliant. Well done. The most important thing, though, is I want to talk about how I've improved my guitar playing more in the last year than I really feel I did in the last 10 years. I don't feel my playing has improved a vast amount since I was about maybe 18 or 19. I didn't feel I was a very different player than I was then. However, I feel I've really discovered something in the last couple of years, and my playing has improved drastically. And it's not that I've learned more or that I'm cleverer than I was 10 years ago. Oh, in some ways, I suppose I probably am. I've got more life experience. But it's that I'm thinking about things in a more sensible way. And really, that's what I want to share with you. So this is all very anecdotal, but I've found these same issues with my students. Now, actually, the number one problem that you have when you are a professional music teacher is the first problem I mentioned. Most kids and adults, actually, either they think they want to play, but then they don't want to play enough that they're willing to go away and do what you ask them to do, or they don't really want to play, and their parents are dragging them along to the lesson each week, and their parents want them to get the grades and all this stuff. It just doesn't work. It's never going to happen. So that's the number one problem that all students have. And I had that problem until I found the guitar. And most of my students I've ever had over the last 12 years I've been teaching, and I ever will have, are going to have that problem. Because, like say, kids generally play because their parents make them play. And adults like the idea of playing, but find they don't really have enough time and all this sort of stuff. You know what it's like. So you've got to want to play, and you've got to prioritise it. Now, once you have decided you are going to play, it's so important that you don't fall into the first major trap that I fell into, which is working on the wrong things. I was one of those people. Now, hopefully you're not one of these people, but I was one of those people who, if someone said that is the hardest thing to play on the guitar, or that is the hardest piece of music, then that's what I would want to learn, and I would practice that, which is completely foolish because, of course, let's think of an example. Let's say like Flight of the Bumblebee. It wasn't Flight of the Bumblebee for me. It was Yngwie, Steve Vai, Satriani, all that stuff. There is very... I couldn't tell you a single paid gig that I've had over the last 15 years since I've been getting paid to play and teach, where they've said, oh, by the way, can you play Flight of the Bumblebee? No, it's just completely irrelevant. Now, of course, if your life's ambition is to play, have the world record, I think that's the piece they use, world record Flight of the Bumblebee, then of course, work on Flight of the Bumblebee. But even so, still what I'm going to share on the board in a moment will help you. You've got to work on things that are relevant. So the first thing that you need to be aware of is hopefully this shows up okay on the board. You want to work on things that you can almost do. That alone, if you take nothing else from this lesson but work on things you can almost do, you're going to find your playing completely goes through the roof. The reason for that is twofold. One is you're bothering to ask yourself and think about your playing and think, well, what can I almost do? And secondly, because you can almost do it, it's not going to take you that long in the grand scheme of studying. It might take you a few weeks, a few months, and then you are definitely a better player. The problem with working on, for me, it was Glass Prison Arpeggios. I've always been hung up on that one. I kind of played it. If you check out my Instagram, you can see me playing Glass Prison on there, alternate picked. Don't know why, but again, because I knew that was a hard thing to do. That was something I wanted to do. The problem was, it took me about, when did I hear Dream Theater? I was probably about, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14 years till I got to the point where I was pretty much doing it to an okay standard alternate picked. It's, I could have been working on so many more useful things. The problem with things that are really hard and beyond your reach is you can't really see the improvement. You can lose motivation. That was never a problem for me. I was always very motivated, but I have seen that in students. If you push yourself and work on things that are too difficult, you're not going to feel you're improving. If you work on things that are okay level of difficulty, you're going to see, oh, I couldn't do that a month ago and now I can, I must be better. So that's the first thing, is 50 to 60%. Actually, I'm saying 60%, really, it's probably closer, like somewhere between 50 to 80%. And if you do nothing else but try and get that up to 95% accuracy, there or thereabouts. We all make mistakes. You're never going to get 100% accuracy with everything. A number of times in lessons I've given a chord a wrong name or something stupid. We all make silly mistakes, which I'll get to in a moment. If you do nothing else but make sure whatever you're practicing, you can almost do. You're somewhere between 5 and 8 times out of 10 you get it right, and try and get it up to nearly 10 times out of 10. That's hugely important. Do not waste your time on challenges which have very little crossover potential into everyday working life as a musician. Your time is far better spent working on the basics. Now, I know that people say this all the time. Hopefully you'll start to realise it's normally people who've been doing it for quite a while who say this. I wouldn't have listened to myself at age 12, I think I was, when I started on the guitar. I would have still been trying to play Glass Prison Arpeggios. But, it's perhaps for some of us, it's a necessary evil. It's something we've got to go through. So let's talk about how to practice. This is hopefully why you're here. So once you've chosen something that you can almost play, there's 3 really important sections to learning and being able to play the guitar. One of the main issues with students who are trying, students who do want to improve, is they're trying to practice something without having all 3 of these sections that I'm going to explain in place. So we're going to use a triangle here. Triangle. This bottom corner here is the one that it says execute there, okay, execute. This is the one that most people do. People who actually want to improve, they do execute. They mean, by which I mean they actually try and do it. They try and play. Of course, if you're just getting dragged along by your parents each week, it's very unlikely that you're really going away and trying to actually do what you've been taught. So without this one, this is 100% important, 100% essential. This corner here is what I call locate. Locate. Locating is knowing how to apply whatever you're trying to do to your instrument. So it might be trying to find a certain note, knowing where it lives on your instrument, finding a certain chord shape. which fret you're using, which string, that sort of thing. On the guitar, really, it is which fret, which string. That's pretty much all we have to worry about on the guitar. So obviously, if people are going away and playing, they're probably getting some of the notes right. They're probably trying to play it in the right place. So these two things here, guitarists tend to do. The reason guitarists do these two things well is if you just think of the way that a lot of guitar information is displayed, we often have either chord symbols, which are a drawing of the guitar, or we have tablature, which is also kind of a drawing of the guitar with numbers on it. So it's quite easy on the guitar to find things if you're looking at a drawing. And then you just try it over and over again, and you might find some things eventually you can play, and you might find other things that you never can play. And that's because this last point here, which is very rarely, guitarists are very bad at this one, which is understand. Now, what understanding is, it's essentially theory. The problem with tab and the problem with chord symbols is they tell you what to do, but they don't tell you why to do it. They don't tell you why those are the right frets to press to work with that piece of music. So if you don't understand what you're doing, and traditional guitar formats do not tell you why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to eventually find you plateau and you get stuck and you're not really sure why. And the reason you're stuck is because you're trying to execute something that you found on the guitar, but you don't understand why it's there, and you don't understand the deeper context for it. So one more thing to explain about this. This is a cyclical process. This goes round and round. The idea is you understand, you locate, you execute. You understand, you locate, and you execute. Understanding and locating, these are what I call us skills. Now, they're us skills because those are things we can work on together. You can ask me as your teacher, I don't understand why C, E, and G are the notes of a C chord, for example. And we can talk about that. You might then say, well, where does C, E, and G live on my guitar? We can talk about that. Executing, though, that's you. That's a you skill. Now, you've probably heard people say to you before that I can't do it for you. If I could practice for my students, I'm sure some of them would be a lot better. But I can't, unfortunately. I can't. So you need, this question comes up all the time amongst guitarists. Guitarists are really bad for this. Do I need to learn theory? If you are asking that question, then yes, you do. If you've never found a problem with your playing and you're just an absolute musical genius, then no, don't waste your time on theory. The problem is we often see professional musicians saying things like, I don't really know any theory. Rock stars are bad for this. The problem is, if they are playing nice sounding stuff, then although they may not know the correct names for what they're doing, they may not know modal names, things like the Mixolydians, Dorians, that sort of stuff, they understand, they can hear them. If they didn't know any theory, they would just be playing random notes. They understand that certain groups of notes work well over certain chords, and certain sounds blend well together, whereas certain other sounds don't. That is theory. That is understanding. Now, if you are bothering to ask the question, do I need to learn theory? Then the answer is yes, you do. Because you are asking that question because you are frustrated at some element of your playing. Therefore, you need to understand some basic theories, okay? And there's a million resources out there. I'm currently compiling a theory book with my brother, which is all the theory guitarists need to know. It's not very much. There's not a lot of actual relevant daily use music theory. Okay, so you may as well spend a few months ensuring you are very comfortable with it. So let's talk about mistakes. Once you're trying to do something, there's 3 types of mistake we can make. So we can make a good mistake. We make a bad mistake. And we can make a silly mistake. So a good mistake, what's a good mistake? Well, a good mistake is when you do something wrong and you know what you did wrong. Okay, so if you muck up and you know, oh, it was supposed to be a B flat and I played a B natural, then all you do is you go back to the executing stage and you play it again. A bad mistake is when everything falls to pieces and you haven't got a clue what went wrong. So what I'd suggest you do is you have another go and check if it keeps happening. Excuse me. Oh, that was wet sounding, wasn't it? If it keeps happening, you need to go back to the understanding stage. You need to put your instrument down. You need to look at what you're trying to play. You need to understand it. You need to know what's the notes, what's the chord. You might then realise, oh, I didn't check the key signature, it's a C sharp. You then go to the locating stage. You find where that new information lives on your instrument. You try and really see it as if those frets are glowing on the instrument. You try and really visualise on the instrument. Then you have another go and you try it a few times, and if we keep making good mistakes, now you know what you're doing wrong, you just keep looping that, and that's now really solid practice. If it goes wrong again, you go back to the understanding stage. Now if it keeps going wrong, you're probably working on something too hard. Okay, now obviously I do not want to discourage people. If there's something you're excited about and you really want to learn, then try and learn it. But you need to make sure that you are really focused in the content that you work on as a student, because we don't have all the time in the world. We need to make sure that we get the most bang for our buck. So if something isn't happening, maybe try putting a slightly simpler skill through this system. Okay, we always make sure we understand what we're doing. We try and break down the theory. What's the notes? What's the chords? What's the rhythms? That's all the theory is really, guys. Maybe which scale does it come from? Where do those things live on your instrument? So where's the notes of the scale? Where's some chord voicings around there? And then we try putting it into context. Okay. Final point about this is if we use the analogy of a footballer. If you want to get good at football, the worst thing you can do is play football. Now that sounds stupid, doesn't it? But let me explain. A football match is 90 minutes long with a break. Probably the best players on the field maybe have the ball between 5 to 15 minutes a match. Okay, if a player's really dominating, then obviously they might have it longer. They're spending 90 minutes on the field, and some players never touch the ball at all. So you could have someone who's played 4 matches, they've done 6 hours of football a day, I think that's correct maths, plus 4 breaks, and they've never even touched the ball. Well, obviously that's daft. What someone should do instead is find the skills that they can almost do, maybe 4 skills, something like that, and say, oh, I can practice for an hour, and work on 4 skills that they can do with between 50 and 80% accuracy. That player is going to be training only 1 hour a day, but they're going to be training an hour with the ball, and they're going to have far greater results than somebody just playing matches all day. Partly because they've got more time with the ball, and secondly because they've got a real focus for what they're training. Whereas in a match, obviously, you're kind of in the heat of the moment. You're just trying to get the ball and then hoping to pass it on or score or whatever. Whereas somebody works on those skills for maybe 15 minutes each through a 1 hour practice routine is going to be a far more efficient player and far more effective player. So that is really a great, I suppose the parallel would be sitting and playing through pieces of music rather than working on individual skills. Now you do want to play through pieces of music, that is very important, But I used to, when I was a teenager, I used to say to people, "Oh, I practice for five hours a day," and I thought I did. I thought I practiced for 5 hours a day. Well, I didn't practice for 5 hours a day. I probably practiced for 45 minutes a day and played for 4 hours and 15 minutes, just jamming along to songs. Now, obviously, if you're doing 5 hours a day of jamming, you're kind of building your skills to an okay standard. But if I'd done less work or been more focused, I would have got far greater results. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. So I suppose the final thing I'll say here, hi to the people who are watching there. Final thing I'll say on the idea of practicing is, well, what would I practice now? Or what do I practice now? So let me rub that out. Okay. Well, what would I recommend you work on? What am I working on? The most important thing is to try and understand music on a deeper level, which I know sounds a bit hippie and pretentious, but bear with me. Again, back to my teenage years, the reason I spent all my time working on shredding, I again, if you go on my Instagram, there's a few Yngwie licks on there. I did have that stuff quite well honed. No one ever asked me no one ever offered to pay me to play Yngwie, but people would happily pay me to play, Bruno Mars and Britney Spears and stuff like that, which is fine. So what should you work on? Well, what I'm going to be doing for the foreseeable future is, I think, if we think about what's important to music, we've got skewed perspectives. We think the guitar is the most important thing, and we are so wrong. So the most important thing in most Western music is the drums and the bass. Now, fortunately, the bass is essentially a guitar. It's not essentially, it is a guitar. Therefore, what I would do is I would go to classic blues players. I'd go to B.B. King. Just this morning, the great album Eric Clapton and B.B. King. Why not start there? It doesn't really get much better than that. Clapton and King, brilliant. Maybe some Derek Trucks. That's a bit more riff based. But yeah, let's say something along the lines of Eric Clapton and B.B. King. I would learn the bass parts on the guitar. Now, not note for note, just a general idea. I would learn the bass parts, think about what those notes are over those 12-bar blues. BB mainly plays 12-bar blues or minor blues, so I'd be learning loads of those and just learning the bass parts. How boring is that? Well, I'd then start thinking about what the drummer's doing, thinking about where the accents lie. Again, in blues, it's a strongish beat 1, a very strong beat 2, weak beat 3, and a strong beat 4. So beat 2 and beat 4 are the snared beat. Beat 1, obviously at the start of the bar, we always want a little bit of a thud. That's where the kick would go. So I would be trying to play the bass part with a bit of emphasis of those beats. What would I do next? Well, I would then forget the bass part, forget the drum part, muck around with some chord voicings, work on playing interesting, what we call voice leading. Sorry, I've got the hiccups. What we call voice leading on the guitar. Now, that alone is a lifetime study. Just playing a bass part, making sure we're accenting it, and then unrelated, playing some nice voice leading parts. The way to voice lead is you do need to understand it, of course. You need to understand it and find voicings on the instrument. But make sure you can play the melody. Then you want to think of what we call counter melodies, which is trying to come up with a nice tune that goes along nicely with the melody. Not the same notes as the melody, maybe running in thirds or below in a sixth or something like that, or an echo of the melody. You know, if the vocal stops for a few bars, maybe you echo what they just played, and you want to try and play that counter melody with the chords. And so what you're doing is you're harmonizing your own counter melodies using chords, and that gives a really interesting effect. Like I say, I'm wanting to do daily lessons here, guys, so I'll probably maybe pick up with that idea tomorrow and show you some examples. So when you are really confident with the bass part, when you're really confident with the drum part, and when you're really confident with some interesting voice leading stuff, you want to try and put it all together. You've only got, in a blues, somewhere between 3 to 5 chords, 3 to 6 chords, depending on how complex it is. But I would suggest you start with some really, really simple blues. Now, like I say, this is all coming from experience, this recommendation. There is no use whatsoever to being able to play the sweep arpeggios from Seventh Sign by Yngwie, or to be able to play the tapping licks from some, is it Circles or whatever in off Surfing with the Alien. Those are all brilliant. They're great technical studies. But it's silly to be able to do those, but not be able to play a bass part with some chords. As you add those elements together, make sure you do not forget the drum part emphasis. Moderately strong beat 1, strong beat 2, weakest is beat 3, and strong beat 4. 2 and 4 are the snare, 1 is the kick, 3 depends on what the drum is doing. Okay, but generally weaker in pop music and rock music. That alone is a lifetime study. Now imagine the difference next time you turn up to a jam, or you're just doing a guitar duo with a friend or whatever it is, and instead of just strumming, you know, a B minor or a B7 chord to play a blues, which was me even a year ago, that would have been my go-to, my instinct. Imagine playing some really effective and really rhythmical chord voice leading, where whatever the soloist's playing, you're responding to it, like the way a piano player would do. A good piano player doesn't just go this voicing over and over again, whatever the voicing is, like we do on the guitar, over and over again, just hitting the guitar again. That's pretty uncreative, uninventive. Now, the reason I suggest you play along to guys like Eric Clapton, B.B. King, maybe some John Mayer, whoever you're into, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure you know they are a reputable player who's going to be playing with a strong band, so that you can really try and internalize what the band's doing. If you are working on your rhythm parts, of course you get the advantage of hearing the soloist. Now you may want to pinch a few licks here and there, or a nice fill that they play, and maybe add that into the chord work as you get inspired. But try your best. I know it's exciting to play the lead stuff, but try and think of yourself as a rhythm guitarist. I was watching a interview with who was it the other day? Oh, I can't remember. Some jazz great. Mulgrew Miller, maybe? I can't remember. But anyway, a really respectable jazz player. And they were talking about the apprentice system that players used to go through. And I was thinking, how does that apply to guitar? I think it was a piano player I was watching. If you join a band at the age of, 13 or 14, unless you are, the next Yngwie, I think Yngwie did Rising Force when he was like 17 or something ridiculous like that, you're going to be playing rhythm guitar. Now imagine if you were just the best rhythm guitarist and you're playing with really confident, maybe older players, but you're really nailing your part and you're really locking in with what they're doing. They are going to find that so much more impressive than someone like me 10 years ago turning up and shredding over all the tunes, playing all the right notes, knowing how to solo, but playing it was just appalling rhythm parts. I was just such a rubbish rhythm player. And it's kind of embarrassing in hindsight that never clicked for me. So make sure that you get that rhythm stuff really internalized, because once you've got that down, and this is the key, this is what I didn't realize. If you think of the apprenticeship system, as you really master the harmony and you really master the rhythm, as you do as a rhythm player, and you master voice leading and moving through passing chords and substitutions and all that stuff, when you move into solo playing, you're going to be hearing all that in your head, and your solos are going to be so harmonically interesting. They're going to be rhythmically interesting. They're just going to be deep, because even if you're playing in a trio and no one else is, there's no chord instrument, it's just drums and bass, you will even be able to accompany yourself. But even if you're just single line soloing, the audience is going to hear those chords, because you're hearing those chords and you're playing over those chords, and it's going to blow people's minds. If I'd spent my last 15 years working on that, and I would have been able to do that 15 years ago, I would have understood how to do that. It just never crossed my mind to do it. It's kind of saddening in some ways to think how much further along I could be on my journey. Not to say that I haven't achieved some things that I'm very pleased with my playing, but I think as I've matured, as my ear has matured as well, and I'm listening to more sophisticated music, perhaps not better music, just theoretically more sophisticated, I kind of wish I had developed some of those skills further than I possibly have. But like I say, I'm not trying to say that I'm rubbish and I've wasted my life. No, I'm very pleased with where my playing is. But if I could have my time again, perhaps I would reprioritize and maybe be a better player. So on that note, guys, if there's any, I see I've got two people watching that. It's probably my brother and my girlfriend. If anyone does have a question, let me know. I'll just hang on the line for a few minutes, maybe do a little bit of noodling to finish with, and I'll hope to see some of you tomorrow. Let me know what you want me to talk about. Right, we'll call it a day there, guys. Take care. I'll see you in the next one tomorrow. Cheers. Bye.